matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and I am back with a bang.
All immigration is good, that diversity is strength. I think that's wrong. The housing crisis is increasingly an immigration crisis. We've done 3 failed bills in 3 years. It's 3 strikes or you're out.
Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick gives his first in-depth interview since resigning. He does not hold back. Plus,
I want to know if you let them men bring me from my kids' home and drop me back off, intoxicated, under the influence of drugs.
British, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Afghan men have been raping working-class white girls for decades in the grooming gang epidemic. Maggie Oliver, the voice on grooming gangs, joins me shortly. Oh, and do you remember this bunch of nutters?
The only solution is jihad by the armies of the Muslim countries, not by you and me. Who we? What training do I have? There are people with arms.
Labour leader Keir Starmer gave legal advice to that group of Islamist radicals in Germany, reportedly. Now we've just banned them here. Good, but is Keir Starmer on the side of our enemies? And we can't control the channel and we're skint, but we're spending billions in Ukraine and the Middle East. Is it time to put ordinary Brits first? Now take a look at this man's face, OK? There he is. A new poll shows that Reform could hand Labour a landslide victory. Richard Tice joins me live, as well as surprise late additions to this show, Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith, who are voting for the Rwanda amendments. Will they now have to resign live on air? I will put that to them next. Ready to get lively on my panellist, columnist Carol Malone. We've got the ever-outspoken Benjamin Butterworth and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Are you ready, Britain? Here we go. Grooming gangs have got away with murder for too long. I tackle that right after Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith join me to explain why they are voting for the Rwanda amendments. I will see you for a jam-packed 2 hours after this.
Good evening. The top stories tonight. A new report into the Rochdale grooming scandal has found girls were left at the mercy of paedophiles due to failings by senior police and council leaders in Greater Manchester. The report highlights years of widespread organised sexual abuse of hundreds of children. It also found a reluctance among victims to make formal complaints was often used as an excuse to avoid investigation. The report identified 96 men still deemed a potential risk to children, but this is only a proportion of the numbers involved in the abuse highlighted in the report. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is facing growing pressure from right-wing MPs to toughen up his Rwanda bill with more crunch votes this week. Tonight, the party's deputy chairman, Lee Anderson, has confirmed he'll join a possible rebellion, saying he'll vote for amendments to the bill. The Tory divisions come as new figures reveal more than 200 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats at the weekend. Commuters are in for a fresh series of delays as the ASLEF union announces more strike action. Train drivers are to take part in a rolling programme of one-day walkouts from the end of the month, including an overtime ban. The union says it's aiming to put pressure on what it describes as a tone-deaf government, calling for drivers to get their first pay rise in 5 years. And we're in for some chilly days ahead as cold air blowing in from the Arctic brings snow and ice to parts of the country. The Met Office warning temperatures will dip 6 degrees lower than usual for this time of year. That means snow and ice is also in place as a warning for tomorrow across Northern Ireland, Scotland and East Anglia. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, so the Tory party deputy chairmen are still in the House of Commons, as we understand it. They will be hot-footing it over to College Green. They are going to be talking to us, fingers crossed, in a matter of moments. Why? Well, it looks as though they have said, that they are going to back the Rwanda amendments. Does that now mean that they have to resign from their roles? So we'll go to them as and when they pop up. But first, a very important story, this. Gangs of predominantly British, Pakistani, Afghan and Bangladeshi men have been raping vulnerable working-class white girls on an industrial scale, and the police have been too afraid of being called racist to act. And it's still happening. How many girls were drugged, raped, murdered or had their lives destroyed because of police indifference? There would be riots on the streets if this was happening the other way around. There would have been marches, demonstrations, it would have kicked off big time. Our left-wing politicians would have been falling over themselves to call it out in Parliament, and the police probably wouldn't have let it happen in the first place. In reality, there are serious questions over whether Labour tried to sweep this epidemic under the carpet. But no, because these girls are white and have had difficult starts in life, they're not seen as worthy. You know what? That's racism. Welcome to Britain, where working-class white girls can be treated as sex slaves, impregnated, put in cages and forced to act like dogs, battered, murdered and trafficked by gangs of predominantly British, Pakistani and other South Asian men, and the perpetrators are treated better than their victims. A damning new report, which comes after a series of other damning reports, reveals how local council officials and Greater Manchester Police left young girls to be brutalised. They ignored the warning signs. A young girl went to the home of a guy called Mohammed Yaqub. He injected her with heroin, apparently, and she died 5 days later. 3.5 years he got, cleared of manslaughter. Just 2 of 100 suspects were jailed. An Asian man who raped a 13-year-old girl didn't go to prison for that. No action was reportedly taken against a pimp who got a 15-year-old girl pregnant, while another child claimed that she was kept locked in cages and made to act like a dog or a baby, with, again, no action being taken against the men allegedly involved. One girl was threatened with a gun before she went to give evidence in a trial. Victims were worried about being kidnapped and sent to Pakistan, which is ironic because we've had real trouble sending some people back to Pakistan. Quarry Ralph, 54, Adil Khan, 53, were convicted along with 7 other men of grooming and gang raping 47 girls as young as 12 and pimping them out to other predators. They were given a few years in prison, naturally, told that they'd be deported, and here we are nearly 12 years on, and as far as I'm aware, they're still in the country. This is not just a few bad apples. Rochdale, Rotherham, Keighley, Newcastle, Aylesbury, Peterborough, Oxford, Bristol, Telford. And I will bet my bottom dollar that this is happening in every major town and city in the UK. Please lecture us more about white privilege and about racism. The only privilege here, as far as I can see it, is that that's been given to British, Pakistani and other South Asian men who can carry on with their lives as normal after raping young girls. The only racism here is towards the white girls who were seen as worthless. Now, I want to make a very important point here. There are paedophiles everywhere. People will be shouting at their television screens right now saying, Jimmy Savile was white. What about the Catholic Church? Absolutely. And we should call every single one of those out, OK? But let's deal with today's report, OK? Let's deal with the matter in hand here. And the fact is that this country, for decades and still today, does appear to have a problem with certain elements of the Pakistani and Asian community abusing predominantly working-class white girls on an industrial scale. And our politicians and police have, in my view, been more concerned about not wanting to stoke racial tensions than they have been about actually sorting the problem out. Many people skirt around this issue, but is it not reasonable to have an open conversation about whether certain nefarious minority elements of the British Muslim community appear content to take part in a grooming gang epidemic. Our politicians and police, in many cases, traded the lives of young girls for an easier life themselves, in my view. I think that's shameful. I think it's a stain on Britain. And many people, I think, have blood on their hands. Now, before we get stuck into this with my panel, I'm joined by the voice on grooming gangs, this former Greater Manchester Police Detective, Maggie Oliver. Maggie, I want to thank you very much for coming on, and I would just like you to explain and articulate to me a bit the importance of the report, why this means so much to you and the scale of the problem, please.
Hi, Patrick. This is not just a report. This is the story of many lives that have been destroyed. And I have been really insistent today to say that this is not just about Rochdale. This is a systemic problem. And I would like to broaden it beyond just the grooming gangs. This story took 12 years to be made public. Actually, sorry, not to be made public, but for the truth that I was speaking 12 years ago to be formally confirmed as being the truth. And throughout all those years, the police, social services have pretended that that job was a great job for British justice. It should not have taken 12 years for this to be confirmed that it was a failed job, that dozens of victims were failed, that the authorities chose not to put resources into this. And,
why, Maggie? That's what I want to know, though. Why? Because
I know.
It looks to me as though you've got vulnerable working-class, predominantly white girls here who were seen as a bit worthless, and then you've got a lack of a desire to, quote-unquote, stoke racial tensions by police forces, and so then nothing gets done. I mean, was I unfair and out of order there to say that I think there is some racism involved here, and maybe that was racism against some of these young white girls?
No, I think what I would say, Patrick, is I think that when I began speaking out, which was 12 years ago, I think very much there was nobody spoke about the ethnicity of the abusers in these gangs. And it is unavoidable to say that the vast majority of the offenders in the grooming gang scandals are predominantly white British Pakistani men. And the children are predominantly young, white, very vulnerable children from difficult backgrounds. I think that is unavoidable, and that was never discussed. But I think as well as the unwillingness to grasp that nettle and have an honest discussion about why it was going on, there is also a class dynamic to it. There is also, I've often said that if it was Boris Johnson's daughter being abused, this wouldn't have happened. These children have been judged as being not worth protecting. And what I've said today is that I actually believe that through programmes like the programmes that you've done on GB News, the drama, I think that the cat is out of the bag in relation to these cases. So I don't think that the discussion is just about racial elements of this case. I am trying to bring it. This is the past, but it is also a problem of the present. And I want to see change, Patrick, for the future. And the only way we are going to get change is by changing the system, by preventing the police from pretending that these cases don't happen, by not putting resources in, by a lack of accountability, by proper resourcing. And today the Chief Constable was really insistent to say that this was a problem of the past. It isn't, Patrick, because in my foundation, in the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we are helping victims every day who are still being failed by the system. And I just want to make sure that you focus on the present and on the future as well as the past. Absolutely 100%. This is still happening. In my view, it should be Dame Maggie Oliver. I don't know if you'd accept that very quickly, Maggie. Would you accept an honour? It's never going to happen, Patrick. You know what? If it did, I would think that, I'm not a voice for the establishment. I'm a voice for the victims. And I want to see systemic changes. I want to see a police complaint system that is fit for purpose. And I want to see accountability, a chief constable in a court of law charged with gross criminal neglect of duty.
I would like. We're going to have to leave it there, Maggie. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very, very much. That's Maggie Oliver there, who's a former Greater Manchester Police Detective who stood up against all of this. Thank you very, very much. Let's get the views of my panel. Our Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. We're going to have to keep this relatively snappy because I think we've got Lee Anderson on standby, guys. But, Carol, just firstly there, I mean, this issue has not gone away, has it? And we do have a problem.
And how many more reports are we going to have telling the same story, detailing the same failings by police, local authorities, by social workers, and all those people apologising to these victims, having done nothing at all for these victims. It is astonishing that, you know, this report today says that there are still 96 men out there who are at large, who are a danger to these young girls. You know, you mentioned before, I mean, some of this stuff in your intro shocked me to my core. You know, these girls were called white whores, white slags. They were called gory girls, which means worthless, by these Pakistani gangs. And not only did these Asian gangs treat them like that, so did the authorities. They thought they were worthless too because they were white working-class girls. And, you know, Maggie talked about the ethnicity of their abusers not being talked about. That is the appalling. And even now, if you bring up the ethnicity today, there are parts of our elite who will say you're racist.
It does. Now, Benjamin, there are question marks over whether or not certain elements of the Labour Party did their best to sweep this under the carpet. When you look at the areas that this happened, there was a lot of Labour-run councils, etc. Do you think the Labour Party has a problem when it comes to grooming gangs?
No, I think obviously what's happened is appalling, and clearly, you know, it shouldn't be accepted going forward.
But where's the outrage from the left? Where's the moral outrage from the left? I don't hear it. I don't hear it today. I haven't heard it in the past.
It's because of their voter base, I think. They forced Sarah Champion to resign, of course. I think the problem I have is that the report after report, as you say, just reflects the moral depravity of political correctness that has infected our public institutions and that allow child rape gangs priority over than facing and standing up to the craziness of political correctness.
All right, look, in a press conference on Monday, Greater Manchester Police apologised for its failures. The Chief Constable Stephen Watson said this: "One of the primary responsibilities of the police is to protect the vulnerable from the cruel and predatory, and in this regard, we failed you. It remains, of course, a source of profound regret that we cannot turn back the clock. We remain determined to do all that we can to bring offenders to justice." Now, breaking news. Just in, Rishi Sunak suffered a massive blow to his authority tonight over his Rwanda bill, with Deputy Party Chairman Lee Anderson indicating that he will vote for 2 amendments that could derail the Prime Minister's migration legislation. And senior Tory MP Brendan Clark-Smith has tonight also declared that he will be joining the growing rebellion and voting for the amendments. I'm joined now by the 2 men themselves, Deputy Tory Party Chairman Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith. Chaps, thank you very, very much. Lee, I've got to ask, are you going to resign?
Well, it's not. This is not a rebellion, Patrick. This is about making sure that the bill is beefed up a little bit. Look, Brendan and I both agree with pretty much 90% of this Rwanda bill. We just feel that there's a few areas in the bill that could be strengthened to make sure that it's watertight. And let's not forget, we're less than a year away from a general election now, and the last thing I want over there is a Labour lot coming in and repealing the Rwanda scheme and opening the borders to 100,000 odd illegal migrants a year, which they will do if they sign up to any EU sort of deal. So this is not about us rebelling, it's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. We just need to beef it up a little bit to close all those loopholes and make sure that people can't come over here and break into our country and use spurious claims to get off the hook. That's what it's about, Patrick.
OK, look, Brendan, I know your role, as far as I'm aware, is kind of almost like a deputy to Lee. Is that right? I mean, are you planning on going anywhere?
No. Is it?
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, we're both deputy chairs of the party, so obviously that's representing the Conservative Party, not just the parliamentary party as well. Yeah. We have our members, and of course we've got our constituencies, as well, that we represent as well.
Yeah, look, it's difficult, Brendan. Look, I think a lot of people, a lot of GB News viewers definitely will be admiring your courage. They think that the Rwanda plan as it stands is unworkable, and they'll be saying, you know, good on you for standing up against it. But if this does mean that Rishi Sunak goes down to a rebellion on this, it is difficult, Brendan, to see how you two stay in post, no?
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't view it like that. What I'd actually say, Patrick, we've got 2 days that are coming up to debate this bill. This is incredibly important, which is why you see not just Lee and I, but our colleagues as well, who we all have opinions on this bill, because we want to make it work. We want to see those planes take off. People talk about different wings of the party and so on. But everybody, you know, we voted for this bill before. We voted for the second reading. We've got it through to this stage. People want to see it work. Now, you will have different opinions on how that will work. You will have different opinions on what should happen with appeals. You'll have different opinions on what should happen with numbers and so on, and what happens after that. But the fact of the matter is that we are pretty much the only game in town to actually trying to make something happen. Now, we've been fighting against the Labour Party since we became MPs here. They've voted 70, 80 odd times against all the legislation that we've tried to put through. And it's not just asylum seekers. We've had foreign national offenders who've committed some quite heinous crimes. We have Labour MPs signing letters stopping planes on the tarmac from taking these people back. So what we all actually agree on is that we want to make this work. We just want to beef it up a bit, as Lee's actually said. So we've put our little sort of...
well, yeah, we've signed the amendments, Patrick. Yeah, and it's vitally important this legislation works. You know, there was a poll out today where I think it was 55.5% of residents in Ashfield, constituents should I say, actually think that people arriving here illegally on small boats should be removed straight away. I cannot ignore that, Patrick. I hate it when I see people making these spurious claims, getting legal aid, you know, going round and round, making different excuses why they should stop in this country. Look, the solution is quite simple to me. If you don't want to go to Rwanda, then don't come to this country. It's that simple. And there's talk about, you know, being sacked and resignation and all this. The most important thing for me is not my role as a deputy chair. The most important thing for me is making sure this legislation works, and I speak on behalf of the people of Ashfield.
So you,
Brendan, on behalf of the people of
I'm going to ask this question to both of you. I'm going to ask a question to both of you. Brendan, I'll start with you. Look, would you just take it on the chin then if Rishi Sunak sacks you over this?
Well, it's perfectly fine. Of course, we have things where you're expected to support the... well, you know, I managed to hold for 3 days before. But, yeah, but I mean, the fact of the matter is we all want to make this legislation work. And sometimes you have to say what's in your heart. Sometimes you have to say what you think is going to make that legislation better. Now, of course, you know, we want the government to succeed with this. This is part of our role as well as parliamentarians, and we're very, very keen at this. And really, it's not about me, it's not about Lee or anything. What it is about is those people at home that are sick and tired of seeing people cheat our system, genuine asylum seekers not actually being able to be dealt with because you have the economic migrants who are cheating that system. Labour Party have open borders completely. So you know what? Yeah, we're not bothered about roles. We just want to make this work, and that's what this is all about, Patrick.
And all right, Lee, I will ask that to you, but also just finally as well, Lee, I mean, to be pretty clear then, as it currently stands, you do not think that this version of the Rwanda bill is actually going to work. It does beg the question, why on earth is Rishi Sunak going ahead with this? I mean, yeah, I mean, why is he banging his head against the wall when he's got people like you telling him that the public is telling him to do something different?
I don't think it's strong enough.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it's strong enough, Patrick. You know, the fact that my argument's been today, since this bill was introduced, is that, you know, I'm of the mind that nobody who enters this country illegally, and I mean absolutely nobody arriving here on a small boat, should be allowed to claim asylum. Look, if they're that bothered about going to Rwanda, then France is a perfectly safe country, just like the other 6 or 7 countries that they've passed through. It's as simple as that. Right. Nobody should be allowed to claim asylum to go on a small boat. That's my opinion. OK, fine. No, that's fine. Look, Brendan, then, if these amendments don't go through, you will have to vote against the bill, no?
Well, not necessarily. It depends, really. I mean, I think we have to weigh that up at the time, and we're going to have a lot of debate between now and then. We hope that these things are taken in board, and at the end of the day, as I think what the government would certainly say, is that this is still the strongest piece of legislation that's come through here. We are the only show in town in terms of wanting to actually get these things stopped, and then if the legislation goes through as it is, Lee and I have just said how we think it could be improved, but if it does go through, we want to see that legislation work, and we want to see those planes taking off, Patrick.
All right, look, both of you, thank you very much for rushing out of that big building behind you and standing out in the cold College Green for us. We do appreciate it, so thank you very, very much. As Deputy Tory Chairman, Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith. Brendan, I demoted him there. Sorry, mate. Right, look, still to come. Richard Tice joins me live to discuss this bombshell new polling that predicts a Tory electoral wipeout due to his party Reform UK. And after his sensational resignation as Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick delivers a warning shot to his leader, Rishi Sunak. All of that's going to come your way in just a tick.
My advice to the Prime Minister is you will not succeed unless you adopt this very robust approach, and then we will let the public down.
But up next, fellow Tory MP James Sunderland goes head-to-head with Deputy UKIP leader Rebecca Jane. Tonight I am asking, following the airstrikes in Yemen, do we need to put Brits first and stop spending money on foreign conflicts? We're not shying away from all the tough questions. Don't go anywhere. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News. Coming up, Reform UK leader Richard Tice responds to bombshell polling. That is his party, not Labour. Who are the Tories' biggest threat? We're also going to be hearing from Robert Jenrick, the former Immigration Minister, who speaks to me in depth for the first time since quitting his role. He doesn't hold back. But first, it's time now for our head-to-head. And in a further escalation to tensions in the Middle East, the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have today attacked an American-owned and operated container ship, the Gibraltar Eagle. Now, the militant group in Yemen have been targeting commercial cargo ships in the Red Sea. Britain and the US launched airstrikes in response. We all know that, OK? But this is the bit that I'm really focused on. With the UK now stumping up a staggering £12 billion to support the war in Ukraine, a further £20 million in humanitarian aid for the Israel-Gaza conflict, can we really afford to fight another conflict in Yemen? When you look around at the moment, do you feel as though you personally have the money to be funding stuff that's going on abroad? Does the government need to put Brits first and stop spending money on foreign conflicts? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, take part in our poll. The results will appear very shortly. But to debate this now, I am joined by the Conservative MP and former military officer James Sunderland and Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Look, thank you very much. We do always go ladies first. So, Rebecca, I will start with you. Do you think we should be putting Brits first here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, obviously we heard some talks over the last few days that Britain needs to send a bigger message and that we need to deter threats. Well, for me, there's no bigger threat than Rishi Sunak himself. He doesn't care, and he's making an absolute laughingstock out of our public because he doesn't care about hospitals, he doesn't care about education, he doesn't care about our policing in the slightest. All he keeps on doing is throwing all of our money at fighting everybody else's fight that isn't our own. So we just have to stop it and look after our own people.
All right, James, that is one side of this argument, isn't it? Which is that we are spending far too much money abroad and not enough here in the UK.
Well, the extent to which our spending is discretionary is the issue. My view is that it's not. The UK is a global power, global presence. We have 90% of our trade comes via the sea. We're a member of the UN Security Council. These come with obligations that we're not going to renege on. And so I disagree completely that Rishi Sunak is not interested in schools and hospitals. Complete nonsense. But we do have a responsibility globally as well.
OK, respond to that then, Rebecca, that actually we might not necessarily see the direct result of it in the same way that we would having our potholes filled in or our NHS waiting list brought down, but it is actually benefiting Brits to go and sort out what's happening in the Red Sea.
No, it's not. Let me take you as a really good classic example, and I can speak from experience. So on Thursday, I was blue lighted to hospital at 11:30 in the morning. I ended up in the hospital by 1:30 in the afternoon, and by 10 o'clock at night, I was signing myself out with a stomach that was bleeding internally because the doctor hadn't seen me and there was no signs of them seeing me. Behind me, there was a terminally ill gentleman that I'll be surprised if he's actually here today, was having his consultations on the corridors. This is real world Britain, and this is what our people are dealing with today. So anybody that wants to try and tell me that Rishi Sunak cares about our NHS, I cannot take seriously because this is the real world that we're living in.
James, I'll throw it over to you. Is it not becoming increasingly difficult to say that we are acting on the international stage for the benefit of Brits when we do not appear to be making decisions that are massively benefiting Brits in this country? You know, we can't control what's going on in the Channel. We're trying to control what's going on in the Red Sea.
Well, it's a very strange narrative because record funding in the NHS, record funding in education. This is a government that takes funding very seriously indeed for these core departments. But we also have obligations internationally. And I'm really sorry, but if a British ship is directly attacked by the Houthis, if an American ship is attacked by the Houthis, if we've got maritime shipping being attacked in the Red Sea, doing nothing's not an option. And I'm afraid we have an obligation under international law to deal with it.
Yeah, Rebecca, there is that side of it. Look, what do you want to happen? You know, you're very pro-Britain, obviously. You're the deputy leader of UKIP. You see Brits being attacked on a British vessel. I mean, do you not want us to hit back?
There is that situation, but then we're missing out completely about Ukraine here. How can we justify the sheer amounts of billions that he's spending on that country? He's just been given the freedom of Ukraine. Good, move there, because he seems to love that country a heck of a lot more than our own. What's that about?
All right, James, I do put it to you that it would be much more of a vote winner if you and the Conservative Party spent 20 million quid filling in potholes, or the 12 billion quid that apparently we've spent on the war in Ukraine, you know, sorting out our Home Office and our immigration system, for example. You know, would that not be more of a vote winner to you?
We talk about the expense of the conflict in Ukraine. Let me tell you something. The cost of a NATO war against Russia would far, far outweigh what we're spending currently in Ukraine. And the important thing is that, far from being a vote winner, a vote loser would be for the Russians to be marching right across Europe towards the UK.
All right, OK. Rebecca, yeah, I'll put it to you that there is a bigger picture here, and, you know, it's all very noble wanting to put Brits first, etc., in that regard, but that is exactly what we're doing when we go abroad and we want to stop Putin or anything. You just don't buy that, do you? You're shaking your head there.
No, not in the slightest. I actually think that the biggest threat to the UK right now is Rishi Sunak himself and how much he's actually just winding Putin up. It is absolutely gospel that anybody knows that if you start touching our country, we are going to fight back and we're going to fight back hard.
All right.
But to carry on just keep on supporting Ukraine when he hasn't even asked the people in this country if they want us to do that, it's going to do nothing but start World War III.
James, I'm very confused about where this money is coming from, to be honest. I mean, as anyone will know, watch this show, I am not the biggest fan of the junior doctors' strikes, right, OK? But we have been told that we haven't really got a huge amount of money for them. Nurses as well are another one. I mean, you can take your pick across the board here. You know, we've got vulnerable older people, social care, all of that stuff, right? So where on earth is the money coming from to bomb the Houthis?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that the UK has NATO commitments. There are at least 30 countries in NATO who all agree the position on Ukraine. They can't all be wrong. We have a duty to maintain international peace, and we must do so. Defending the realm, defending our people, defending the UK is our #1 priority in any government, and that's shared across Europe and across our NATO allies. In terms of the Houthis, once again, I mean, you could argue that the cost of flying 4 Typhoons down towards the Red Sea and bombing the Houthis and back was not excessive in terms of the overall defence budget, but it was a necessary measure. And, of course, the Prime Minister today mentioned in the House of Commons that he'd be prepared to do it again if the Houthis don't get the message.
Yep. All right, both of you, thank you very much. We asked for a head-to-head. We certainly got one. Much appreciated. That is the Conservative MP, former military officer James Sunderland, and the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Look, who do you agree with? Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says Britain needed to act against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Do we need to put Brits first now, though? Stop spending money on those foreign conflicts. That's what I was asking you. Simon on Twitter says it's not as black and white as that, unfortunately. The strikes in Yemen are necessary to ensure our trade and ensure our vessels are free to go about our business without fear. Yep, look, fair enough. Adrian on Twitter says guaranteeing safe passage of maritime traffic and ensuring global trade can function is putting Brits first. Yep, similar theme here so far. Paul on Twitter says the UK is in no fit state to go off and fight disputes in other countries. Our government can't even stop rubber boats from crossing the channel. So, there we go, a range of views. Our verdict is now in. 76% of you think that we need to stop spending money on foreign conflicts, while 24% of you say that we do not. Coming up, Islamist terror group Hizb ut-Tahrir has finally been banned by the UK government. But why did our politicians take decades to do it? They've been banned elsewhere already. They're calling for Muslim armies on the streets and jihad. Our Met Police, if you remember, said jihad can mean loads of things. Well, actually, it turns out jihad does mean holy war, and they've been banned now. But we'll get reaction from the legend of Fleet Street, Kelvin Mackenzie. Also tonight, former Immigration Minister, easy for me to say, Robert Jenrick, slams the liberal groupthink that is tearing Britain apart.
All immigration is good, that diversity is strength. I think that's wrong.
Yes, and Jenrick's view is backed by a brand new survey that shows that nearly 9 in 10 UK parliamentary constituencies want to see immigration levels reduced. Next, I've got Richard Tice on. I'm going to ask him whether or not he is going to hand the keys to Downing Street to Keir Starmer. Don't miss it. It's Patrick Christys tonight, and we are only on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. It's only on GB News. Fleet Street legend Calvin Mackenzie coming up with the latest on that Rochdale grooming gang scandal and that new banned terror group. But hold your horses, because it's time for Richard Tice. Now, nearly 9 in 10 constituencies want immigration levels reduced. This is according to a recent survey. But despite this, the public have seriously underestimated how many migrants come through our borders, guessing that it is 10 times lower than the 672,000 that actually came into the UK. Now, seriously, apparently more than 50% of the public thought that net migration to the UK was 10 times lower than it is. And 9 in 10 constituencies still wanted it reduced. I've got to be honest with you, I love the British public, but I do not think there's any excuse any longer for not knowing the amount of people coming into this country and what a disgrace that is. Reporter Anna Riley has been gathering opinion from locals in Rochdale.
So my figure's about 45,000.
It's hundreds of thousands. God, it is.
Thousands and thousands.
About 4 million. What would you do if I said the figure is actually 672,000?
I'd be shocked. I'd be quite shocked.
Right. It's a right load, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely insane. I'm joined now by Reform leader Richard Tice. Richard, look, thank you very much. What do you make of the public thinking that we have about 10 times lower the level of net migration than we actually do?
Good evening, Patrick. Well, it's a sign that essentially the mainstream media have deliberately underreported the huge scale of what is actually mass immigration in recent years under a Conservative regime that we've now had for 14 years, where Prime Minister after Prime Minister after Home Secretary after Home Secretary lied to us and said they were going to bring immigration numbers down, and actually they've willfully, deliberately opened the borders to mass immigration. You've said it there, though, Patrick. 90% of all constituencies want lower immigration. And if you want lower immigration, the only party that will freeze all non-essential immigration, Patrick, is Reform UK. And that's why the bombshell poll out this morning, 14,000 adults, that's why we're going up in the polls, and we're going to have a massive, massive difference at this general election.
Well, I've got to say that, to be fair, Richard, you are going to have a massive difference as things stand. That difference, though, might actually be letting Labour into Downing Street. You know, this poll said that the Reform Party...
But hang on, Patrick. No, I'm going to stop you there because it's so boring, this ridiculous narrative.
Well, it's not ridiculous. Look, we get on well, but it's not ridiculous. You're going to take a load of seats off the Tories, potentially, or you're going to lose the Tories a load of seats.
No, Patrick, you have to punish absolute failure. You have to punish people that deliberately lie to the British people, change the way our culture is, because they've allowed mass immigration, uncontrolled, in direct lies to what they promised us.
But what if that means a Labour government, Richard?
They're as bad as each other. They're both pro-mass immigration. They've both got the highest taxes. They're both pro more regulation, more government spending. This lot are socialists. Starmer, who I call Starmageddon, is also a socialist. Socialism is a disaster. It's a catastrophic cocktail. But, Patrick, there's no difference between the two. This lot have broken Britain, and it's now only Reform UK that can save Britain. And that's the positive message we're getting out there to the British people. And that, Patrick, is why we're going up in the polls and why the Tories, quite rightly, are absolutely terrified.
Yeah, so, I mean, Labour are saying the polls are forecasting a 120-seat majority if Reform succeed in dragging voters away from the Tories. I know that you clearly think that, you know, they're as bad as each other and that the Tories deserve a kicking over their failures. And many people will agree with you for that. But is it not a concern that Britain, as a result, could end up getting worse? Not just on immigration, but on the kind of social issues that Keir Starmer stands for, that the Labour Party stands for. Look at where the party is on Palestine, for example. You know, that you could let that in.
Patrick, the premise of your question is that the Conservatives have done a good job and are competent. They are useless, they're incompetent, they've broken Britain, they have to be punished. Let me tell you, Patrick, we did the right thing 4 years ago, right? We stood aside to give Boris Johnson an 80-seat majority, to do Brexit properly and to drive this country forward. They've utterly failed. They've lied to us. Frankly, if they had any moral decency or integrity, they would do the right thing for Britain. They would stand aside. And I'm telling you, 7 days a week, I beat Keir Starmer in a head-to-head. Without fail. It's time they stood aside and did the right thing for the country. The country is sick of the toxic Tories.
OK, Richard, thank you very, very much. That is Richard Tice there, who is certainly... look, he's not in Cumbria. Actually, Richard, sorry, just quickly, mate, just quickly. Are you in Cumbria? Is that right? That's what it says here. Whereabouts? What are you doing?
I've been campaigning in Cumbria. I've been campaigning in Skipton. I'm all over the country. You know, we've got a job to do. We've got to save Britain, Patrick. I'm everywhere.
You're everywhere.
Back in the studios in a few hours' time. Don't you worry, I'm everywhere. We're going to shape and influence.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about, whether or not I was going to have to cover one of your shows at some point. Richard, thank you very much. You take care. All right, Richard Tice there. It was a Reform UK leader. Look, what do you make of that? There's a lot of noise at the moment, and it is split. I look in the inbox a lot. GBNews at gbnews.com, and there is a bit of a split over whether or not, you know, people think the Tories deserve a kicking, but also, you know, do you want to hand the keys to Downing Street to Labour? Look, coming up, rising Tory star, well, Robert Jemrick, spells out to young people why they need to be concerned about sky-high immigration numbers.
There is no way that we can fix the housing crisis without solving this immigration question. The housing crisis is increasingly an immigration crisis.
I managed to get the first proper sit-down interview with Robert Jemrick since he quit as Immigration Minister. I will bring you the full interview on both legal and illegal immigration very, very soon. But before that, Hizb ut-Tahrir has finally been labelled a terrorist organisation and banned by the British government. I mean, they only had to call for Muslim armies and jihad every single day the week before it happened, and it was already banned in Germany. But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer apparently gave those radicals legal advice in Germany. Kelvin Mackenzie's not happy, and I'll get his views on today's devastating report into the Rochdale grooming gang scandal as well. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and we are only on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Right, let's crack on. James Cleverly has announced today that the radical Islamist group Hizb ut-Tahrir will be prescribed as a terror organisation banned by the British government. The group sparked outrage after repeatedly calling for jihad on British streets while celebrating the Hamas attack on Israel back in the 7th of October, and has previously been banned in Germany, China of all places, and the majority of Arab nations, believe it or not. But with views like these, you can understand why.
The only solution is jihad by the armies of the Muslim countries. Not by you, me, who we. What training do I have? There are people with arms in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, across the Muslim world.
Lovely bunch of lads. It's worth noting that Labour leader Keir Starmer voluntarily led a team of lawyers to the ECHR back in 2008, arguing that Germany's prohibition of Hizb ut-Tahrir breached their rights to freedom and religion of expression. Kelvin Mackenzie joins me now. Has it taken the British government too long to act here? Can Keir Starmer be trusted when it comes to people like that?
Well, it's not only Keir Starmer that refused to do anything about that group. Blair turned it down when they suggested it. Cameron turned it down. So let's give credit, and he doesn't get much credit these days, to Rishi for at least standing up against this groupage. Starmer on a series of issues, that will be one of them. There will be loads of them. As DPP, as a QC, would have been acting free and gratis on occasions against what I think is the very interests of our nation. But for some inexplicable reason, the voters right now, as that shocking polling which you've been talking about, don't seem to embrace the mistakes that he's made in the past and the shocking mistakes I'm sure he's going to make in the future.
Yeah, and also as well, there's a couple of issues that I'm very worried that we're not able to trust the Labour Party on. It brings us on to whistleblower Maggie Oliver, who discussed at the start of tonight's show. An independent review has today highlighted a series of shocking failures by authorities over the Rochdale grooming gang scandal. Over the course of nearly a decade, Greater Manchester Police, Rochdale Borough Council left hundreds, if not thousands, of vulnerable children at the mercy of ruthless paedophile grooming gangs, the majority of which were British Pakistani men. The suspects were overwhelmingly British Pakistani, while the victims were mainly white girls from poor backgrounds. Kelvin, did a fear of appearing racist contribute to the authorities' failure to act here?
100%. There was a period, actually I think that period has probably passed now, but there was a period where actually everybody was saying, I'll tell you what, it won't do my career any good if I get involved in all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of people of a different religion and they'll all start campaigning against me. I mean, it happens in teaching, so why wouldn't it happen in the police force and or the local council? And also the local council had a number of members of that community who were sitting on it.
You're talking about, obviously, the British Muslim community.
The British Muslim sitting on it. So obviously, you know, they're going to act for their own, as we have seen actually going on the streets of London and elsewhere. So, but honestly, the thing that I honestly lifted my spirits about all this was that a whistleblower, right, sacrificed their careers, right, in order to fight to expose this. Exactly the same thing happened in the post office. So there are good people out there, right, who, despite the fact that everything could go crashing around them, knew that something was wrong at the heart of it all and crashed their way through it. Our country should be so proud of the Maggies and the Mr. Bates of this world who are prepared to stand up and fight against this kind of almost, you know, this huge blob of people who say, oh, don't do anything, it'll cost your career, it will cost your livelihood. How brave are those people? Honestly, I felt really powered up for them. And the fact is that lady, she's spoken to you, and she's spoken to others today, is still saying that there are hundreds of children who are going to be abused and are being abused. What about this report? That report said that there were 96 adults. They didn't identify them, but there were 96 adults out there who were still
when the Telford grooming gangs got, by the way, it's important to say that no doubt local councils will refute the fact that they did not act on this based on their religion. So there we go. When it comes to some of the victims in this, I've spoken to victims of Telford grooming gangs who bumped into their attackers at the shops. They get released back out into community, 2 or 3 years. We're talking about people who've been convicted here of raping, like, tens of young underage girls. The sentences, and we can't deport them. We can't deport some of them.
Well, in the Rochdale one, they ended up charging one of the girls who had been raped by... it was a joint charge. It was madness. There was madness going on there. It's not often I would say it, but I'm grateful for Burnham for organising the inquiry in the first place.
All right, Kelvin, look, thank you very, very much. That is Kelvin Mackenzie there. A very special interview is coming up for you next. Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick raises serious questions about the leadership of Rishi Sunak.
We've done 3 failed bills in 3 years. It's 3 strikes, we're out.
Well, the Rwanda rebel delivers an ultimatum to the PM. He says that mass immigration is bad for Britain, and he explains why the housing crisis is now an immigration crisis. It's a wide-ranging interview. It's his first major sit-down interview since he resigned as Immigration Minister, which of course comes on the back of devastating net migration figures. It comes on the back of this absolute circus that is going on about the Rwanda deal at the moment. I talked to him about legal immigration. I talked to him about illegal immigration. It is well worth a listen, and there is absolutely no need to turn that telly over, all right? This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and it's only on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. The cold theme's set to continue, and so it will stay frosty and icy at times with some snow showers too, but there is also the potential for some heavy persistent snow across northern parts as we go into Tuesday in association with a weather system currently towards the northwest of the UK. However, as we go through this evening and overnight, it's going to be cold, it's going to be frosty. We will see further snow showers feeding down on a brisk northerly wind, so particularly across northern Scotland and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind, that's where we're most likely to see the snow showers. Elsewhere, further inland, largely dry with some clear skies, and under the clear skies, a widespread frost. Coldest across parts of Scotland could get into negative double figures. As we go through Tuesday then, for much of England and Wales, and actually a largely fine day. Again, some winter sunshine around, but further north, the potential for some persistent snow to push in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, and particularly across Scotland. Could see more than 10 centimetres of snow perhaps, and so that could could cause some significant disruption. Again, it is going to be a cold day, temperatures a little bit below average for the time of year. As we look towards Wednesday, and there is a feature towards the south of the UK, currently likely just to stay to the south of us, but the potential it could bring a bit of significant snow to southern parts of the UK. Further north, looking largely dry, plenty of winter sunshine again, but some snow showers for far northern parts perhaps. Later on in the week, likely to turn dry and temperatures lifting a little bit too. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's 10 o'clock, this is Patrick Christys Tonight, and I am back with a bang.
Because the pace of change, with such a large number of people coming in each year, is so great. It's putting real strain on communities and on the kind of well-integrated, united country that I want to see.
I have the first in-depth interview with former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick since he resigned. He is absolutely scathing.
My advice to the Prime Minister is you will not succeed unless you adopt this very robust approach, and then we will let the public down.
He goes big on mass immigration, cultural change, the Rwanda bill, deportations, and much, much more. It's an incredibly revealing interview. It's an exclusive, and it's all yours next. I will also, of course, have all of tomorrow's front pages for you today with my press pack, columnist Carol Malone, former Brexit Party MEP Belinda Delusi, and the outspoken Benjamin Butterworth. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. That's right, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is not to be missed. He's next, and he isn't holding back on Rishi, Rwanda, much, much more. That's all after your news.
The top story at a minute after 10 o'clock. A new report into the Rochdale grooming scandal has found girls were left at the mercy of gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders in Manchester. The report highlights years of widespread, organised sexual abuse of hundreds of children. It also found that a reluctance among victims to make formal complaints was used as an excuse to avoid investigation. The report identifies 96 men still deemed a potential risk to children, but this is only a proportion of the numbers involved in the abuse case itself. Meanwhile, as you've been hearing, Rishi Sunak is facing growing pressure from right-wing MPs to toughen up his Rwanda bill with more crunch votes this week. Tonight, the party's deputy chairman, Lee Anderson, has confirmed he'll join Apostle Rebellion, saying he'll vote for amendments to the bill. The Tory divisions come as new figures reveal more than 200 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats this weekend. Commuters are in for a fresh series of delays as the ASLEF Rail Union announces more strike action. Train drivers will take part in a rolling programme of one-day walkouts from the end of this month, including a ban on overtime. The union says it's aiming to put pressure on what it describes as a tone-deaf government, and it's calling for drivers to get their first pay rise in 5 years. And stay warm tonight. We're set for the coldest night of the winter season, with temperatures set to drop to -15 Celsius in some places. It's due to a cold plunge of Arctic air sweeping in across the UK, making it 5 to 6 degrees colder than usual for this time of year. There's a snow and ice warning in place until tomorrow across Northern Ireland, Scotland, and even as far south as East Anglia. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. It's only on GB News, and it's time now to deliver the first of my two-part interview with former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who resigned from government last month over his insistence that the government's controversial Rwanda plan didn't go far enough. Now, in our revealing and at times scathing chat, Mr Jenrick dramatically claimed that Britain's current uncontrolled mass migration policy was damaging the nation, both culturally and economically, and he said that the pace of change to the UK was too hard and too fast. Here's what he had to say when I kicked off the interview by asking about the current net migration levels, especially in relation to people coming from Muslim, African countries and India as well. Net migration levels of around 700,000 a year.
Illegal migration is a matter of great public concern. I think in many respects this is more important because the numbers are so much higher and the impact upon people, the length and breadth of our country, is even greater. Having 750,000 people coming in perfectly legally every year is placing unbearable pressure on public services, on housing. It's stopping young people from getting the dream of home ownership, and it's not helping the economy because it is a deterrent from companies investing in technology, things that drive up our GDP and productivity. It's undercutting the wages of British workers, and it's also changing our country because the pace of change with such a large number of people coming in each year is so great. It's putting real strain on communities and on the kind of well-integrated, united country that I want to see, and as Conservatives I think we should value very greatly. And as you say, the geographical mix of people coming into this country is changing a lot. When we were within the European Union, we were predominantly attracting people from the EU and from other like-minded countries who share our values, like the United States, Canada, Australia. Today that is somewhat less, and are being replaced by very large numbers of people coming from other parts of the world who...
Why could that be a problem, though? Why could that be a problem?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One is that some of those countries are not countries which share our Western liberal values, and so when you allow a very large number of people to come from those countries, you have to accept that it will change things in this country. And you do see that in some of the events of recent months, for example, like the protests over Gaza. I think there is a link to mass migration within that, and that worries me. I do worry that there are real challenges with integration in our country today. You only have to go to communities like Bradford or Leicester, near to where I represent, to see that there are people leading segregated lives there. And I don't want to see that as the future of our country. I want us to be a integrated, united, cohesive United Kingdom. And you see particular examples and flashpoints as well, such as what happened a few years back in Batley. And remember that the teacher who was involved in that incident is still fearful for his life because of the extremism that we see within our country. And so for those reasons, I think we should be very careful and selective about who gets to come here.
You must have been calling this out around the cabinet table. You must have been making these points very, very clear. Do other members of government not care about mass immigration like this? I mean, did they ignore their own immigration minister?
Well, I think we took back control of the levers of our legal migration system when we left the European Union. That was the great reform. You know, that's what many people have been calling for years, and the British public had essentially been voting for at every general election and in the Brexit referendum. But then we didn't use them correctly. We essentially traded free movement with the European Union for free movement with the rest of the world, and we invited millions of people, often low-skilled people, to come into our country. And that was a mistake, but we can correct it. And that's the message that I've been making and championing since I was made immigration minister and since I left, because I think it's so important that we use those levers that are now within our hands to bring down the numbers. There were those, including people who are in cabinet today, who I think made the wrong judgment that when people voted to leave the European Union, they only cared about control, not numbers. And I think people actually care deeply. They want to bring the numbers of people coming into this country down.
Do you think they get it? That's an important point, I think, that you look at the latest opinion polls, you look at how people feel about immigration. The latest stats that I saw was that on average, people underestimate the amount of net migration that we had by 10 times, which is remarkable, but still 9 out of 10 constituencies wanted to cut immigration, so presumably they'd have some sort of fit if they realised the real numbers. Do the Cabinet not get this? Do they not quite understand that, do you think?
Well, you'd have to ask them, but it's certainly true that there are relatively few of us who are making this argument in a very determined way. I'm proud of the fact that we did secure the package at the end of last year, which will be the largest set of reforms to our legal migration system ever, and will reduce the number of people coming in by around 300,000. But you've got to remember that that still leaves between 300,000 and 400,000 every year coming in. And the polling that you've just referred to shows the public want us to get down to the low tens of thousands. So there's a massive task ahead. We've got to implement those reforms that I put in place quickly so that there isn't a fire sale in visas in the coming weeks. And we've got to bring forward more because the public expect us to. And I think some people in politics today have become conditioned to the idea that we will live in a country where there will be hundreds of thousands of people coming in every day, every year legally. That's not right. We've got to change that. And we've got to make the argument that this is socially and culturally harmful to the country. It does nothing for our economy. It doesn't help GDP per capita, which is what I care about. I want working people in this country to be better off. I don't want to just create more GDP for the OBR statistics. That doesn't work for people in this country.
That exact point, because people make the economic case for mass migration, and they say that we would be worse off without it. Are we, you've seen behind the curtain on this, are we worse off per capita? What is the true extent of people coming over here and, living on benefits or in social housing, not being net economic benefits to this country? What's the truth there?
Well, the truth is that because we've traded some higher wage workers for a very large number of low wage workers in recent years, there is no argument that these people are making a big net contribution to the UK. I think far from it. You've seen people coming in, for example, to work as a care worker and then bringing a number of their dependents with them. Well, that's a false economy. I want to be paying that British care worker a bit more so that they have a fair wage and can look after their own family on that, not import somebody from Southeast Asia with their own family, which will cost tens of thousands of pounds to house, to educate their children, to ensure that they can have access to the NHS. And for most British workers, the problem here is that by living on this drug of imported labour, their wages are being undercut and their employers are not investing properly in their skills and their training. And for the future of the British economy, we're not investing enough in technology, in the things that will truly drive up productivity and make us all richer. If mass migration was the route to prosperity, we would be one of the richest countries in the world. But instead, over the last 10 or 20 years, we've seen productivity flatline and GDP stagnate. We've got to fundamentally change the economic model of our country and not just be hooked on importing foreign labour.
Since you resigned, the government appears to have rowed back a bit on things like the salary threshold, student visas, bringing dependents over, all key parts of that basket that you really wanted to push forward. You've mentioned the levers already in this interview. Look, I know that you were very close to Rishi Sunak. Can he be trusted on immigration? It doesn't look like he can.
Well, I hope he can. I do think that the Conservative Party has lost its way on migration generally, and in particular on legal migration, because it's shown such a disinterest in this issue in recent months and years. I want to change that. That's one of the reasons I left government, so that I can make the argument for taking action, because our voters care passionately about it. There's no route to victory at the next general election or a Conservative majority without showing action on this. And people don't want to hear talk. They want to see action. And more importantly than just the politics, I don't think this is the right thing for our country. I want us to be a country where workers are properly paid, where we're highly productive, where the pace of change is not so fast that people can't understand and that their country is the one that they want it to be. You know, this is really, really important for the future of the country, and that's why it's so important now that Rishi Sunak and the government bring those changes that I agreed with them into play very quickly, and more importantly than that, bring further changes forward so that we can meet our manifesto commitment.
It doesn't look like they're going to, though, does it, unfortunately? It looks as though that they're going to drag it out over a series of reviews for potentially another year or so, which would mean that this isn't implemented before the next general election. That to me, and maybe many
Well, that would be a huge mistake, Patrick, and that would guarantee defeat at the next general election, because this is quite clearly one of the most important issues in British politics to many voters, many Conservative voters. This is the most important issue. And as I say, the time for talk is clearly over. All we can do to win the trust of those Conservative voters now is to deliver. And so I really urge the Prime Minister to take up the mantle of this, and I will certainly keep pressing it as hard as I can.
Just before we move on to the illegal side of things, I just want to drill down. So as far as you're concerned, as former Immigration Minister, it is unequivocal that net migration at the levels that it is currently at the moment is damaging Britain culturally and in terms of infrastructure. So in terms of the NHS, in terms of the burden on our education system, in terms of the burden on housing and social housing. And these were all points you were making when you were Immigration Minister.
Yes, absolutely. You know, to take an example of housing, you know, I'm one of the foremost champions in Parliament of house building. I think it's incredibly important that we help young people onto the housing ladder. There is no way that we can fix the housing crisis without solving this immigration question. The housing crisis is increasingly an immigration crisis now. We'd have to be building not 300,000 new homes a year, as is the government's target, but more than 500,000 new homes a year just to keep up with the pace of migration. You can see polling now amongst young people where they see that it is deeply unfair that they are unable to get on the housing ladder. They're spending more and more of their income on rent, because there are so many new arrivals in the country. And so it's for those young people as well that we've got to resolve this issue. And on the cultural question, which I think is so important, there is a mantra which we are increasingly expected to recite like a religious catechism, that all immigration is good, that diversity is strength, that we are the world's most successful multicultural, multi-ethnic democracy. And I think that's wrong and very complacent. There are real problems in our country with integration. The pace of change is too fast for many people, and that's why we've got to fix this problem and bring down the levels of net migration.
Heck of a lot there. The illegal side of things is still to come, and that is incredibly revealing. To respond now, I'm joined again by Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Benjamin, just to react to that first half of what we've seen there, he says that diversity is not our greatest strength, that young people like yourself should want to cut net migration in order to solve the housing crisis.
Well, he's totally wrong. You know, he's been in government pretty much the whole time the Tories have been in power, and they haven't cut immigration. They've put the numbers up. So I don't know how he can sit there and suddenly have a problem with it, because he voted for it every time. And the fact is they've done very, very little to solve the housing crisis. You know, there are hundreds of thousands of second homes and buy-to-let homes. That has more of a problem than immigration. And it was only last year that the government accepted figures that it would lose £5 billion a year if it cut immigration immigration to the tens of thousands. Okay. I think that's what Robert Jenrick needs to accept.
But Belinda, he was talking there about how the Conservative Party has lost its way. We've become addicted to the drug of mass migration, and he says that the cultural problems with this now are not spoken about enough. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. Not all cultures are the same. Not all cultures are equal. You know, our ancestors have fought for hundreds of years to protect women's rights, to protect gay rights, to you know, give everyone... I tell you what, the biggest thing, blasphemy laws, they've come back in through the old back door. We fought tooth and nail to get rid of blasphemy laws in this country, and now they're sneaking back in. And because not all cultures are the same, I think we do need to be careful when we're importing hundreds of thousands. It's such a huge number over such a short space of time, with no integration problems. Then culturally, women and girls are more at risk when we have to import, when we don't have to, when we rely on these cheap labour from very Islamist countries.
There was a line in that, Carol, that I think flew under the radar, but I don't want to let it. OK, I was very keen to say, did they ignore the immigration minister? Were you the one pushing this stuff, and were you ignored by people around the cabinet table? And the response there, really, reading between the lines, was that there were very few people, and are very few people in cabinet, who seriously care about immigration in the numbers that we've got it at the moment.
Because the bottom line is, to criticise multiculturalism or diversity in this country is tantamount to heresy now. You know, it is not racist to have concerns about both. It's not racist to be concerned about massive numbers of people coming to this country from cultures which are different from us, culturally, religiously, ethnically. It's diversity hasn't united us. I really believe it's divided us. And Braverman talked about this, remember, in her New York speech, and she said the thing about multiculturalism here is that it makes no demands on the people, on incomers, to integrate. And that is true. We have massive sections of this country who live totally separate lives under totally separate laws which are really harmful to women. Sharia law. Okay. You know, we know that's bad. We know that women don't have rights on that. We know we hear things about stuff happening to women that are vile, and we can't intervene because it's a different culture. Now, I'm sorry. People coming here have a duty to integrate, and if they don't want to, I don't really understand why they're here.
I don't accept that. London leads the world because of its multiculturalism. You see
so
people of all different religions living side by side.
Have you seen the protests on a Saturday?
The most recent immigration figures show that the country with the most immigrants to Britain is Nigeria. Now, they're overwhelmingly going to be Christian and probably have quite similar views to Belinda. The truth is that we're culturally better off and economically. If we didn't have immigrants, Britain would be broke.
Say the opposite.
Well, he says not. Robert Jenrick was pretty clear there.
You should shout at Robert Jenrick because he voted for all this.
Better off when we have people demonstrating in our streets, a million plus people in our streets.
And a teacher in hiding in Batley.
Guys, I have got much more for you to row about in just a minute, because you're not going to believe some of the things that come out of this interview in the next section. More explosive elements of this interview with former immigration Robert Jenrick coming your way shortly.
My advice to the Prime Minister is you will not succeed unless you adopt this very robust approach, and then we will let the public down. It would cost more than £500,000 to integrate and support every single illegal migrant. I think, frankly, it's disgraceful that people are dying as a result of their inaction.
Right. He pulls back the curtain on the true extent of the cost of illegal immigration and how difficult it is to deport absolute wrongers. I'm going to be talking to him again very shortly. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. It's only on GB News, and I don't think you want to go anywhere, do you?
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News. And it's time now to bring you the second part of my pretty explosive interview with former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick. After detailing how uncontrolled mass legal immigration threatens the identity and culture of our country, we moved on to discuss the small boats crisis and what amendments the Rwanda plan needs for it to finally get off the ground.
And that hangs over this is, does it work? And that's all that really matters to me, because creating a workable deterrent means that we stop the boats and that we fix this problem that's causing so much harm to our country. I don't believe the bill does that, and there are two ways, at least, that we have to fix it. One is stopping this merry-go-round of individual claims where an illegal migrant can break into our country and then claim that Rwanda might be generally safe, but it's not safe for me because of this or that reason, usually spurious, planted in their mind by a lawyer or legal representative. We have to stop that. And I know, having done the job, been one of the authors of this policy, that every single migrant will do that and the policy will quickly fall apart. So one of the things that I want to amend the bill is to end that. So you come here, you will be swiftly detained and removed to Rwanda in all bar the most exceptional circumstances. And the second thing we've got to fix are these injunctions from the Strasbourg court of the kind that stopped the flight a year and a half ago, the so-called pyjama injunctions where some foreign judge can say at the last minute, often without giving reasons, that the flight can't take off. At the moment, the government's position is that they don't want to see this, but that it would be in breach of the law, in breach of international law if we were to do that. So I want to amend the bill to say, no, the default position is that we will ignore these injunctions and we'll get those planes
Rishi
off.
has not given any indication he's going to do that yet, though, has he? I mean, today, again, he said, I won't let foreign courts get in the way, but without making any kind of amendments whatsoever. Is he lying about that? Does he have the bottle?
Well, I don't know, but I think it would be a political mistake of the first order to allow a foreign court to stop a flight and to prevent the scheme from taking off and being operationalised. At the moment, the Prime Minister's own lawyers are saying that it would be illegal for him or any minister to sanction ignoring a Rule 39. And so my amendment is absolutely critical to enabling this scheme to work, or as night follows day, we'll be in the same situation that Priti Patel was in the summer of 2022. Flights grounded, scheme aborted, and the small boats crisis continues. The only countries in the world that have fixed this problem, and some have, Australia, Greece, more recently, have taken the most robust approach. That is the one that I took as immigration minister. That's what I wanted to take with this bill. And my advice to the Prime Minister is you will not succeed unless you adopt this very robust approach, and then we will let the public down.
Some people say that the Channel migrant crisis poses no particular security risk to ordinary people in Britain. You, again, have first-hand experience of some of the people who are coming across the Channel.
There are people who have come across in small boats who are now subjects of interest, who our intelligence services have to try to track because we believe that they're a threat to the public. And there are also people who have come across on small boats or otherwise illegally who have committed very serious offences in this country, people who have raped and murdered British citizens. And that worries me intently, as it should do anyone who is in government.
Why can't we deport them? You know, a lot of people are screaming at the television screen now, get them on the first flight out of here. Why not?
Well, part of it is the web of international treaties and obligations that we are a party to. And so some of those people, ministers have intervened to try to remove from the country, and then they have been able to frustrate their removal for years, sometimes indefinitely, claiming as a result of European Convention on Human Rights obligations that they now have a family life in the UK, and it would be a tragedy if they were, torn away from their wife or their kids, when what we care about is protecting the British public. And for others, it's been the fact that our legal system is so slow that those processes just take far too long. What this teaches you is you've got to stop people coming in the first place, because once they're here, it's inevitably very difficult. So what you've got to do is have the strongest possible deterrent. That's why a policy like Rwanda is actually so important.
We saw some deaths at the weekend in the Channel, unfortunately. Could the EU just stop this now, and are we wasting money sending it to the French to try to patrol our borders?
Well, the EU could do a lot more. It was a real tragedy what happened in the Channel, but tragedies like that will continue to occur, and the EU have it within their power to do a lot more. The boats that we have very strong intelligence that tracks them all the way from China through Turkey up through Europe.
So these are the boats that they use.
The boats and the engines. We have a great deal of intelligence about their movements. We provide that to partners. Some are supportive of the UK. At the end of last year, I went to Bulgaria, where the government is doing a lot to help us seizing boats. But the EU will not instruct customs officers who find these boats and engines to seize and destroy them. They could do that tomorrow, and I think, frankly, it's disgraceful that they don't. So they are more concerned about whether or not a plug or an iPhone charger is uniform than whether or not these death traps, these boats and engines that they know abound for the English Channel, they know are going to be used, as happened this week, to put people into, often in freezing weather, which will deflate and start to fall apart within hours and risk the lives of those migrants. They will not do that. And I have engaged with them, as have many other people who are within government, and I really urge them to take their responsibility, if not out of concern for illegal migration, but out of concern for people's lives. They have not shown the resolve that I would expect. I think, frankly, it's disgraceful that people are dying as a result of their inaction.
If Labour get in, how likely do you think it would be that the civil service would advise them to maybe have some kind of amnesty to clear that asylum backlog? Is that something that was ever mooted at all with you?
Well, I'm very worried about the prospect of a Labour government for lots of reasons, but one of them, of course, is immigration. And you only have to look back on their record when they were last in power. On illegal migration, they did do an amnesty. The Labour government, with John Reid as Home Secretary, did an amnesty where they literally wrote out to illegal migrants and said, sign this bit of paper, accept this offer, and you'll be given status to remain in the UK. I was offered that solution to the asylum backlog and turned it down. That's not right.
That's interesting. No, that's really interesting.
That's not the right
so
way.
You obviously turned it down, but you were offered, were you?
Yeah, no, I was advised that was as you'd expect, that is the simplest, fastest way to clear these cases, but it would be wrong because the system shouldn't just be efficient, it should be rigorous. In fact, it needs to be a lot more rigorous than it is today, not less.
Look, just quickly on the issue of migrant hotels, we heard the government saying they're going to close down 50 of those hotels, and that sounded like it was a really good thing, especially for the taxpayer. But actually, is it? Because these people have got to live somewhere, haven't they? What kind of consequences are we seeing of that at the moment?
You shouldn't think that that is the end of the story. Anyone who's granted asylum then claims benefits, families get on the housing list for social housing in communities, and people have to be looked after one way or another. We have legal obligations to do so.
Of those people being moved out of those hotels, in your experience then, are the vast majority of them going to be unable to support themselves, do you think? This is going to be a case of social housing, it's going to be a case of benefits, and this is the reality of it?
I think for most of those people it will take years to properly integrate them and make them net contributors to our country, and there's been one study by the University of Amsterdam that suggested it would cost more than £500,000 to integrate and support every single illegal migrant. And that's the sort of scale of the cost. That's why we mustn't just deal with the symptoms of this problem. We've got to fix it once and for all.
Robert, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Robert Jemmett there in his first in-depth interview since resigning as Immigration Minister. Thank you. But wait, there is a little bit more, actually, because this is what Robert Jemmett said when I asked him if he would actively vote against Rishi's Rwanda bill.
Well, I'm certainly going to support the amendments. They're in my name and those of Bill Cash, and there's now 60 Conservative MPs backing them. I hope the government will move and produce amendments that create a bill that will actually work. If they won't, then I've been clear that I'm not going to support the bill, and I'll actively consider voting against it, because all that matters is what works, and I'm not going to support a bill that doesn't work.
Well, it's strong, isn't it? To respond now, I'm joined again by Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, former Brexit Party MEP Belinda DeLucy. Benjamin, £500,000 per illegal immigrant it might cost us to essentially integrate them if they want to integrate into British society. It's a heck of a lot.
I mean, look, we know that immigrants add more to the economy than they take away, because the own figures of when he was in government said that we'd lose £5 billion a year in tax revenue if we didn't have hundreds of thousands of immigrants. The fact is that I think that Mr Jenrick's U-turn on government policy has far more to do with him being yet another Tory MP hoping to be Tory leader than it does caring about immigration. Because all of the problems he talked about, he was voting with the government, he was in the cabinet or in a ministerial position for years.
Yeah, but to be fair, it's one of the reasons,
I think this is a hypocrite, and it shows that the government is falling apart, because he's more interested in getting the top job when they lose the election than what's going on.
I get your scepticism. I do get your scepticism. But I think he made it very clear to me that the reason why he was now in the position that he's in is so that he can actually be more robust, and he was a bit sick of having to toe the line, I think. But Belinda, there was a thing that stood out to you there. You gasped about he revealed that the European Union could just stop all the boats and the boats' engines at any of their customs officials, and they actively choose not to do that.
I mean, surely, like, it's almost like what a 3-year-old child could come up with. Find and destroy the boats. Number one, top priority. That's what anyone would do if they wanted to protect their citizens first, their borders first. And the EU making a choice not to do that contributes to this massive failure they have on the migrant crisis, that Labour somehow want to sign up with the EU to join their brilliant, solution. But the problem with the EU is not just Merkel opening the doors to the world saying come to Europe. It's the Schengen zone. It's the fact that they haven't helped Italy, they haven't helped Greece. The reason that the far right are on the rise in the EU is because they've completely failed on the migrant crisis, and it is putting their citizens at risk. People are getting hurt, churches are being burnt. You've got issues with anti-Semitism across Europe because of mass migration and the left enabling them. So something has to be done. I thought he was brilliant on that, but the EU, you don't have to encourage me to dislike it.
Carol, key point for me on that, which I was very keen to drill down on, is will Labour be told by the civil service, if they get into power, that a serious option is to have an asylum seeker amnesty? He said he was offered that. He turned it down. I appreciate we're not in a great situation now, but he turned it down. Do you think Labour would?
No, I don't think they will for a second. I think Labour wants... I think their policies open doors. I think they've got no plans to control or to halt illegal immigration or any kind of immigration. I think they agree that we have a lot of elites in this country, and there's a lot of Labour people in those elites who want more immigration, not less. They want us to go back into the EU. They don't want Britain to have its own identity. They want an international identity. And I think they will make that happen by opening the doors again. You know, diversity is fine, as is multiculturalism, as is immigration, but it cannot become the basis of our national identity. And that is because that means we don't have one, basically. And I just think, you know, as I said earlier, diversity hasn't united us; it's divided us. And you know, Braverman was slated. She was accused of peddling dangerous rhetoric. And now, whenever people say what Jenrick is saying there, he'll be slated as a racist by huge sections of the elites in this country. You talked about the Schengen countries and the EU countries. All of them now are trying to find their own Rwanda. They want a deal where people are processed outside of the country because they cannot cope with the influx. You know, Schengen is creating more walls now across Europe than Trump ever threatened to.
Well, look,
it's like crazy.
Yeah, right, great stuff. We are going to be returning to stuff like that because the front pages have been dropped in front of me, and there's some stuff about that on the front pages, as you would imagine. But coming up, after the Queen reportedly fumed that the Sussexes named their second child Lilibet, did the runaway royals lie about having Her late Majesty's permission to use the name? But next, it is time to run you through the first of tomorrow's front pages, hot off the press. There are some rock stars on there. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and it's only on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. This is Patrick Christys Tonight. Let's give you tomorrow's front pages, shall we, in the liveliest paper review you will get anywhere on the telly. It's the very first front pages, right here now. The Metro, 96 Rochdale groomers still free. Child sex scandal report. We've spoken a heck of a lot about that tonight. I think we'll return to it. Whistleblowers vindicated, the police and council rebuked for failing girls. Basically, a load of monsters are still out there on the street. The Eye. Migrants taken off first Rwanda flight are still in asylum hotels 18 months later. Well, yeah, that's because we didn't send him to Rwanda, isn't it? The Sun. Kyle to be dad again, this time with his wife. Exclusive. Stars baby number 6. Prolific, that guy. Absolutely prolific. The Daily Telegraph. Tory deputy chairman to rebel over Rwanda bill. May I urge you after this show is over to rewind on YouTube, go on social media and hit up that interview that I did with Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith, both of those deputy chairmen, saying that they may saying that they may well end up not be that bothered if they are sacked over rebelling over the old Rwanda bill. We go to The Guardian. Defiant Houthis attack cargo ship as conflict widens in the Middle East. Yep. Final one here, we've got The Express for you. It's an inside story. Oh, no, sorry, it's not. I'll defy Euro judges who block Rwanda flights. That's the Prime Minister. I think a lot of people are scoffing at this, who just heard from Robert Jenrick, and I'm sorry, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I'm sorry, Rishi. I don't believe it. I believe it when I see it. Let's go to a story on the inside now, all right? BBC slammed in Gary Lineker row after making rubbish excuse for Match of the Day star. So, the BBC was accused of talking rubbish last night after it claimed that Gary Lineker mistook an anti-Israeli tweet for an item of football news. So, Gary Lineker essentially tweeted something about Israel being banned from taking part in football matches. He has, I mean, objectively, I would argue, taken a side when it comes to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Gary Lineker, no doubt, will probably deny that. But, Carol, I'll start with you. I mean, look, how much more of this are we going to get from Gary Lineker? You know, he'll be telling us that he got clapped in M&S again next after tweeting this, which is also absolute BS.
How many more times is the BBC, the great corporation, going to humiliate itself defending Lineker for his outrageous tweets? Granted, this wasn't his, he retweeted this, but to pretend that this man who puts himself across, you know, as a great political intellect and a political brain, that he thought that we're talking about football and not news. This is nonsense. No. And the BBC know it, but the rules don't apply to Lineker. We know that. We've had experience of it.
Yeah, look, I've seen him outrageously. Do I say lie? Can't say that. But anyway, I've seen him say some things that I've not necessarily believed. When it came to, you know, using the language of 1930s Germany. I wasn't talking about the Nazis. Yeah. Sorry, but what was 1930s Germany? I mean, sorry, but you weren't you? Talking about the Nazis? Oh, you go, oh, look, sorry, my finger slipped. I mistook a tweet about the football. Did you really? I mean, look, Benjamin, I think you quite like Gary Lineker, don't you? But, I mean, not about this, really, do you?
Well, look, I don't share the view of the tweet about Israel and football. Yeah. But that's slightly different, because the fact is he doesn't work in news and current affairs. He talks about football for a living from the BBC. And I think their rules are clear that if you don't work in news and current affairs, you can have opinions on these issues. And I think it's ridiculous, the idea that, you know, Michael Portillo making train documentaries would have to cease to let people know that he's a small C conservative. Of course,
well, his trousers give that away.
Yeah, well, exactly. But do you know what? I think this is just another way for people to try and attack the BBC. He is allowed his opinions. He's not making news documentaries or anything like it. And we should lay off Gary Lineker.
He's putting out his opinions on a platform that was created for him by his position at the BBC, and that's a fact.
Oh, was
and
it?
the rules were changed to accommodate him.
Even
and bad rules.
Even I know Gary Lineker's famous because of his decades of football.
No, you don't.
All right, Belinda, go on.
Gary Lineker no, hang on. When was he a footballer? Even you know.
All right.
No clue.
Look, Belinda,
not a clue.
He's an idiot. Gary Lineker is an idiot. To retweet that, Gary Lineker is an idiot. Yes. To go on about Nazi Germany rhetoric and then to tweet out Israel should be banned. He should be ashamed of himself. He's a prize hypocrite. He's done more damage to the BBC than anything in the last few years. And the BBC are like his little lapdog. When will they grow a spine and get rid of him?
Let me stick with you, Belinda. The front of the Daily Telegraph. Tory deputy chairman to rebel over Rwanda bill. So this is Lee Anderson, Brendan Clark-Smith. They are going to vote for the amendments to the Rwanda bill. I put it to them directly at the start of this show. If the amendments fall, do they then vote against Rishi Sunak's bill. Do they resign? Are they bothered if they get sacked? They didn't seem to be bothered if they got sacked.
No.
They didn't say they were going to resign, but they also, crucially, didn't say they were actually going to vote against the Rwanda bill.
Well, look, principled Tories are as rare as hen's teeth these days. So if they're going to stand up and be principled Tories and actually put their vote behind something they either like or remove it if they don't like it, they shouldn't be putting their name anywhere near a bill without 100% agreeing with it. Then if they stay that principled and they get the sack, then they will be heroes. But if they go along with it...
He says he's backing his constituency. His constituents, Lee said something like 55% of his constituents want him to vote against it, so he's doing that.
Look, if only Lee Anderson were as interested in principles as he is TV cameras, then maybe he would have some effect on the Tory party. The fact is that they are just posturing because they know this is a difficult issue electorally for them. That much is evident. You've seen that in the polling of the popularity of reform. But they're not actually going to
they
do
can't
anything
do it again.
about
they can't
it.
March. We had
None of them. Just to point out, when Robert Jenrick resigned, he then still didn't vote against Rwanda at that stage. These people are just playing games while in government.
And this is exactly why the public doesn't believe anything they say about immigration, because they're fighting like cats in a sack, different sections of the party, and they can't agree on anything.
Yeah, but they also don't believe
Labour.
Labour.
Why would the public trust them?
It's, you know, I mean, how can you trust Labour? Again, it comes back to that thing. Labour are going to be offering amnesty.
No.
Look, I've got a little bit of a right reply here from the BBC, OK? Classic.
A little bit of a
The
what?
Telegraph. The BBC told the Telegraph, we aren't going to give a commentary on individuals or individual tweets. Is that it? Oh, sweet.
That's it,
lovely. Coming up, with the Queen reportedly fuming after Harry and Meghan took her name Lilibet for their second-born child, and Gary Lineker in bother yet again after backing calls for Israel to be banned from international football. Things could get heated as I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Oh, yeah, and I've got more front pages for you. Absolutely do not go to bed. See you in a tick.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News. It's time to return to our paper review. More front pages just been delivered right now. Daily Mail, PM, I will defy Euro judges on Rwanda flights. We've also got the Queen, I don't own the palaces or the paintings, only my name, and now they have taken that. Gosh, apparently the Queen was very angry. That's strong, if true. The Times, I think, yes, there we go. World on perilous path to war within 5 years, Shapps warns. Well, that's great. It might be nice if, as our Defence Secretary, you stop that from happening. Sunak will speed Rwanda appeals and stop to rebels. We go to the Mirror, name-calling. Palace happy that, quotes, truth is revealed about Queen's fury over Harry and Meg naming their girl Lilibet. The latest twist in saga about what to call a tiny baby. Royal insiders were quietly celebrating last night after a new book claimed to reveal the truth behind that particular issue. So there we go. There is also Hamas claims 2 hostages are dead in new horror video. So there we go. Right, now, you might remember that we've been running a competition, haven't we, here, for you wonderful individuals out there to win some cash and a few other bits and bobs as well. Well, I'm very pleased to say that Phil from West Yorkshire was selected as the first ever winner of the Great British Giveaway. Get in, Phil, back of the net, taking home 10 grand in cash, a brand new iPhone 15, 500 quid to spend in a store of his choice. He recently got engaged to his girlfriend. Hey, well done, Phil. So he's looking forward to putting his winnings towards celebrating the big day later this year. Can I come? Please, Phil, I want to come to the wedding. Listen to the moment that he was told that he'd won big.
I've got some really good news for you.
Okay.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a wind up, is it? I never won a penny in my life.
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh, my God. Oh, God. Oh, you shocked me.
You've won a brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Wow.
And you've also won £500 to spend in the store of your choice.
Oh, my God. I can't believe it. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Drinks on Phil. Well done, mate. All right, well, yeah, there we go. Well done, Phil. Right, OK, that could be you next. Remember, we will do it again. Now, the Great British Giveaway launches, again, on the 29th of January, exclusively on GB News. Who knew? Certainly not me, although possibly I should have done. Anyway, it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. All right, Carol, is your Greatest Britain?
Mine is the thousands of Brits who attended a pro-Israel rally at the weekend at Trafalgar Square. These people went to this rally to remind people the time is running out for the poor hostages. 100 days. We have women, children, the elderly who are being held and tortured by the Hamas butchers, and the world appears to have forgotten about them. So thanks for reminding us.
Good start, Benjamin.
Mine is Keir Starmer, who spoke at the Jewish Labour Movement conference, speaking up for the same issues as what Carol just mentioned, but also because he's clearly on track to be the next Prime Minister. Thank God.
Oh, all right. Go on, Belinda.
Mine is the legend that is Maggie Oliver.
Yes.
The incredible, best of British woman who was on your show earlier, Patrick, who was a big whistleblower over the grooming gangs and is still fighting for girls today who are being used and abused by such grooming gangs. Good for her. I'm so proud of her.
Today's Greatest Britain is Maggie Oliver. So well done, Maggie. Now we've got about a minute left. Who's the Union Jackass?
All right, Harry and Meghan, who lied to us when they said they had the Queen's permission to call their baby Lurpit. In Robert Hardman's new book, Charles III, New King, New Court, he says a member of the royal household said that she had never seen the Queen as angry as when she was told that. So, shame on the pair of them.
Shame. Well,
mine is the supporters of the Houthi terrorists at Saturday's protest. How amazing that the people who so riotously condemned Israel for the loss of life in Gaza now backing terrorists who have killed more than 8,000 Muslims themselves in Yemen.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Belinda?
I have to say, Gary Lineker, enough said. I don't have to say anything else. It's just such a wally, Gary Lineker.
All right, OK. Today's winner are the people who supported the Houthi terrorists. Right, so there we go. Benjamin wins this particular round. Can I just say thank you very much to my wonderful panel. We got a lot out of you tonight and I loved every single minute. And thank you to you at home or listening on your radio or watching online. Go back, re-watch every single bit of it. Headliners is on next for even more in-depth analysis into tomorrow's front pages and what's inside. See you tomorrow at 9.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. The cold theme's set to continue and so it will stay frosty and icy at times with some snow showers too, but there is also the potential for some heavy persistent snow across northern parts as we go into Tuesday in association with a weather system currently towards the northwest of the UK. However, as we go through this evening and overnight, it's going to be cold, it's going to be frosty. We will see further snow showers feeding down on a brisk northerly wind, so particularly across northern Scotland and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind, that's where we're most likely to see the snow showers. Elsewhere, further inland, largely dry with some clear skies, and under the clear skies, a widespread frost. Coldest across parts of Scotland could get into negative double figures. As we go through Tuesday then, for much of England and Wales, and actually a largely fine day. Again, some winter sunshine around, but further north, the potential for some persistent snow to push in across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, and particularly across Scotland. Could see more than 10 centimetres of snow perhaps, and so that could cause some significant disruption. Again, it is going to be a cold day, temperatures a little bit below average for the time of year. As we look towards Wednesday, and there is a feature towards the south of the UK, currently likely just to stay to the south of us, but the potential it could bring a bit of significant snow to southern parts of the UK. Further north, looking largely dry, plenty of winter sunshine again, but some snow showers for far northern parts perhaps. Later on in the week, likely to turn dry and temperatures lifting a little bit too. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set